Hey, what's up guys, TotallyDubbed here, and today I'm doing a video review on the MSI Optix MPG27CQ. Now this monitor is a 27-inch, 144Hz, 1440p, curved gaming monitor. If that wasn't a mouthful, I don't know what was. The main feature that this monitor has is the fact that it's integrated with SteelSeries Gamesense technology and has RGB strips along the bottom and around the back of the monitor. More on that in just a bit. Now in terms of the monitor itself, it comes at around £520 in the UK, links will be down in the description below, and also around $500 in the US. PS, I don't know why they said Full HD and also 1440p in the same title, but I can guarantee you it's a 1440p monitor. It also comes in at a quoted response time of 1 millisecond of response time, and again I will talk about that in a bit. First, let's talk about the build quality. Now, the monitor has two HDMI 2.0 inputs and one DisplayPort 1.2 input. Perfect if you've got a graphics card that can output that and has those certain ports, because you will be able to drive 144Hz at 1440p at no problem. Around the back of the monitor, you've got the stand, obviously, but you can get rid of this and replace it with a 100x100mm VESA stand instead. Speaking about the stand, I do find it quite big. It's got a triangular shape, and if I just show you a little bit over here, you'll be able to see that the monitor has a triangular shape and doesn't quite fit on my IKEA Freddy monitor Razor over here. It's a little bit awkward, however, it's not a big deal because it's still quite sturdy. It's made out of metal as well, which means the monitor doesn't shake if you were to rage quit or hit on the desk really hard. Now, in terms of adjustments, you've got height adjustments, tilt and pivot, but you cannot rotate it. Just to show you that, you've got that, and that. Now, all the adjustments are fine. I would have liked rotating, sort of rotating feature, but I understand why they haven't included it, because it's a curved monitor. So if it wasn't already, if you weren't already aware of it, yes, it's a 1800R curvature, so therefore you get a slight bit of extra immersion. On the downside, there is a slight tail off on either side of the monitor when you're looking at really extreme angles, but I don't see anyone really doing that realistically, so it's not a big deal. Now, the monitor has RGB strips, if it wasn't already obvious, at the bottom of the monitor, but also around the back of the monitor, which I'm just going to show you right now. So as you can see, the RGB strips are over here, and the reason you see it kind of flickering sometimes is because I've got Counter-Strike running, and therefore I think as I'm getting killed by easy bots, it's kind of responding to that. Now the monitor itself at the back has got RGB strips, and usually they appear right here, which again, on a live video, as you can see right now, is not appearing, which is fantastic. But nevertheless, they are there, I can guarantee you, and they look just like that as MSI have shown. You'll also be able to see over here, you've got two USB 3.0 ports and 3.5mm jack inputs. You'll need a USB cable to be attached that comes with the monitor in order to use Gamesense technology and for these USB ports to be activated. So no real complaints there. And also coming around this side of the monitor, you'll be able to see you've got a joystick control, which is fantastic for entering the OSD or changing inputs or what have you. So great sort of addition there by MSI. Also, I love the fact that this monitor has a three-side borderless design, which means on the edge of the edges of the monitor, the top and the sides, you've got no sort of extra bezels. Of course, there's a slight black bezel, which is has to be there for the display, but that's very minimal, and I love that because if you were to hook up two of these, you could have a kind of like seamless experience between two monitors with very little bezels. So good job again by MSI. I was going to say SteelSeries because I was looking at the SteelSeries Gamesense sign at the bottom left. Now let's talk about that, about the panel, then go into SteelSeries Gamesense technology, and then also talk about a bit of the OSD and gaming performance. So first of all, the panel itself. Now the panel has a VA panel. It doesn't, however, use the quantum dot technology, which is found on a very similar Samsung monitor. The Samsung monitor in question over here is the CFG70. That is pretty much the exact same specs of this monitor, however also has HDR capabilities, which this monitor does not. There's also the Asus Strix ROG XG32VQ, which is, again, is essentially the exact same monitor that we have in front of us, however has Aura Sync, which is something made by a proprietary thing that Asus have done, and also it's a 32-inch monitor. These monitors, all three of them, including the MSI that I'm mentioning over here, all come in at the same price, around £520. Now, just reducing the EV of my my camera, so you got a little bit more accurate reproduction of the colors, you'll be able to see the monitor's display quality. Now, I just have to mention that I brought down the brightness of the monitor around 10%, simply because my camera struggles with a very light image in front of it. But overall, I found the monitor to be decent for gamers. It's not the most absolute color accurate monitor out there on the market. It doesn't really compete with class leading or a VA Quantum Dot monitor. However, it's very impressive. The contrast ratio is really good. It's really kind of punchy. The color accuracy is good but not amazing. And overall, the scenes that I had on the monitor came out really well. So from gaming to watching movies to watching a series or even just browsing the web, I was very much impressed. To show you what I've done with the monitor, I'll just go through the OSD and also through the other on-screen settings. And by the way, if you're hearing sort of drilling noise in the background, that's some neighbors having some work done to their flat. Now, what I like about the OSD over here is the fact that you've got a nice sort of depiction of what is being used right now. So, for example, 1440p, 144 Hz over DisplayPort with 0 latency mode enabled. Very small addition, but really nice to see that as soon as you open up the OSD. Now, within the settings, you can see I've got game mode as user, black tuner as 9, response time as fast, I'll get to it in just a bit, anti-motion blur, 0 latency on, refresh rate and alarm clock disabled, which is like an on-screen display of those, screen assistant off as well, and FreeSync disabled. Now, it's got AMD FreeSync, the FreeSync range around 48 Hz to 144 Hz, pretty much a full range there. But you'll need an AMD card, and I've got a NVIDIA GTX 1080, and therefore it doesn't show up, it doesn't work with AMD FreeSync technology. Now, one thing I should mention is on the response time setting, now you will see it increase in brightness, but that's because on the fast mode, you've got a maximum luminance around 400 Kelvin, whereas on fastest, you've got 190. Now, you might notice the complete opposite in the video right now, and that's simply because, as I said, I turned down the brightness on the fast mode, simply because of the camera to be able to pick it up. But just to prove what I'm saying, I'll open up a screenshot that I had when I was had the calibrator, and you'll be able to see over here the difference. Now, it is pretty massive, and you'll be able to see the difference over here. The current over here was when I had it on the fastest mode, and here that was on the fast mode. So that is a big difference in terms of the overall luminance of the monitor, and it's something to bear in mind, because if you're going to be wanting to get the most out of the monitor, the fastest sort of response time of the monitor, you're going to have to use it to the fastest setting, and therefore when you use it the fastest setting, you're limited in terms of overall brightness. I'll get into what these modes actually do in terms of the overall ghosting of the monitor as well, but it's something I thought I should mention when it comes to the display quality and the OSD. Within the professional mode, you've got different modes as well that you can enable if you so wish. You can see my settings as I'm flicking through them really quickly. You can see the brightness, I set it to 11 right now, color temperature normal. And then other than that, you've got PIP and PBB, which is quite useful to have if you've got different sources. And then you can customize the navigation key and also disable the RGB LEDs as well if you so wish. So overall, the OSD is great, and it complements the screen very well. And I like the fact that you can customize it to your heart's content, and it's very easy to navigate as well, especially with the top of the OSD, which kind of really quickly tells you what's going on. So overall, in terms of display quality, I'm pretty impressed. And in all honesty, I put it through a calibrator, and I found that the the results kind of speak for themselves, and we're in line in what I thought of the monitor as well. The colors aren't perfect, they're nowhere near what I would use if you are a professional photo or video editor, but they're perfectly acceptable if you're a gamer. When it comes to contrast ratio, it's 2600 to 1 contrast ratio is amazing, and therefore it would be absolutely great if you have dark scenes or really light scenes and you want that sort of quick contrast ratio. Now in terms of the brightness uniformity of the monitor, is again very impressive for a gaming grade monitor, nowhere near enough for a professional grade monitor, but nevertheless it's impressive. You can see throughout the scene it's fine with a slightly different variation at the bottom. That's simply because I think the monitor is lit from the bottom and therefore changes the overall brightness uniformity of the monitor. As I said, it's a gaming monitor, it's not a professional editing monitor, so I can't see myself, if I was a professional designer or something like that, wanting to edit. This monitor will definitely not be the monitor that I would choose for the work purposes. But is it something that if I was, I don't know, casually editing memes or some photos for certain clients where it's not being highly paid or has to be printed out on a massive scale, then it's absolutely fine. The color accuracy does a decent job and you'll get a relatively good reproduction. So now let's talk about Gamesense technology and the actual gaming performance of the monitor. So first of all, Gamesense. Now you can see at the bottom I've got LEDs and they're pretty much assigned to what I want to. Bottom right is my health. Left hand side is my ammo. I've got the armor and head armor over here and the kill count on this LED. Now the way it works is absolutely fantastic. Now you can be able to see the ammo one. If I switch to my knife, it disappears, and if I start shooting with my gun, it kind of fades out. Now, is this something that I'm going to be using in a game? Absolutely not. I can't see myself really having to look at the LED. But at the bottom of my eye, I can see those LEDs and the color of them. Now, it's something that's quite cool and quite kind of quirky to have, very much like the gaming peripherals that SteelSeries make, and my comments about the addition of Gamesense. It's not something I would go out and say, oh, I absolutely need it. It's something instead that I say, oh, it's a nice addition. It's cool to have that sort of different technology, and I quite like the way that the integration works. So that's pretty much it with the Gamesense technology. It works flawlessly. I have no sort of complaints about it, and I like what MSI and SteelSeries have done. But it's not something that I would see myself using all the time, especially because the Gamesense isn't supported with all games. For example, Counter-Strike and Dota 2 work. However, if I was playing like a game like Fortnite, well, as far as I'm aware, that's not supported, and therefore the LEDs won't be able to respond to the in-game actions. So it means that it's kind of limiting factor. And now, in terms of the gaming performance of the monitor, that is something I should comment on, and something that is definitely quite impressive. Now the monitor itself has slight inverse ghosting or overshoot ghosting, and that does occur on the fast and fastest mode of the monitor. On the fast mode, I felt that there was like a good blend between the overall response time of the monitor and how the monitor could respond with the ghosting. But on the fastest mode, I felt I had the smoothest experience. However, I had more inverse ghosting. Now the inverse ghosting really wasn't all that bad. If you can see, if I set it up right now, the inverse ghosting isn't overly bad. It doesn't completely change the scene that I can see in front of me. However, it is something that you will notice when you're playing more visually intense games. Counter-Strike is not a good example for this, but again, like a game like Fortnite or Battlefield 5 or Battlefield 1 or what have you, is going to be a lot more noticeable, and you will notice that the inverse ghosting occurring in front of your eyes, and it might kind of trouble you when you're looking at really cool scenes. My suggestion is that you use the response time on the fast mode, and then you enable zero latency mode. You get a perfect blend. Now, with those modes, would I use it for competitive gaming? Absolutely. The monitor really does look nice for competitive gaming and responds very well. I had no complaints using this, and I definitely see myself using this monitor for competitive gaming or casual gaming or what have you. So overall, I must say it's very impressive, and MSI have done a great job. Now the monitor performs very much like the Samsung equivalent. It's again, my biggest complaint is the fact that when I'm using it at the fastest setting, it really does reduce the overall brightness of the monitor, and that can take away the experience, because if you're using the monitor in a bright sunlit room, then you will struggle to really see enemies because the monitor is too dim to see. So overall, what do I think of the monitor? Well, in honesty, I do like the monitor. I think that what SteelSeries' integration with MSI, what they've done is great, and the fact that we've got RGB LEDs with actual purpose is fantastic, and I've got no complaints in that department. There's nothing wrong with having that. It's a nice addition. It's not a gimmick, and it looks cool. But is it something that I would go out of my way and buy over another capable monitor? Well, given the price of £520, I would much rather choose the Samsung LFG 70 because that has HDR, and even if I don't use HDR, it's got the quantum dot technology, which means that you've got much more accurate colors and a beautiful overall display. If I want something bigger, I'd go for the Asus. However, if you're someone who loves RGB, if you're someone who really likes to have that integration of SteelSeries game engine, if you're someone who uses plays those games, then yes, absolutely, this monitor will appeal to you more than a HDR gaming monitor will do, especially if you don't use HDR. Also, before I should clock off, I should also mention about SteelSeries as well, because they are very much fundamentally part of this monitor, and I must say their software works flawlessly. You can customize the monitor to your heart's content as you would do with any sort of peripheral, and it works flawlessly and instantaneously, especially with a live preview enabled. As you can see over here, you can change it per zone or per group, which is fantastic. You can change it to your heart's content with all different colors and different settings. You can also customize the back of the monitor as well, which is fantastic as well. Then within the engine apps, so for example, if I go into Counter-Strike, you can adjust these again to your heart's content and to whichever color really works for you. I really like the integration, and I think that the way that SteelSeries have done it with MSI is flawless. It works absolutely flawlessly, and it's a great job on both teams or both companies involved. Now obviously, if gaming is not something that you really care about, or you don't play these games, or if you don't play these games and you want to use the Gamesense technology, you still can, and you can even have it like, let's say, Audio Visualizer. Audio Visualizer is a really cool integration and a really easy way of having it working with music. So therefore, if I go to configure it, if I just press that and then press play, you'll be able to see that the visualizer is visualizing the music and therefore translating that to the RGB strip down below. It's cool. It's not something, again, that I would be like, oh my god, you need this in your life, but it's something that I would say, yes, it's a nice addition to using these RGB strips in order to make them actually useful, or sort of a nice addition. So there we go, guys, that's pretty much it. I know it's been a long review, but I really wanted to cover absolutely everything there was to know about the monitor and really showcase the monitor in its full glory. As I said before, it's not a monitor that I would personally buy myself, because I would probably opt for the Samsung equivalent instead. However, it is a nice addition to the monitor market for people who actually want useful RGB strips at the bottom of their monitor. This is it. This is the best RGB gaming monitor there is on the market. There's no ifs and doubts about it. And in all honesty, its gaming performance and the looks, the design, the OSD, and the image quality really are great. And there's no complaints, no massive complaints. It's just when you compare it to its competitors, you notice a little bit of kind of like cracks appearing. So there we go, guys. I've been Totally Dubbed. If you enjoyed this review, make sure you give it a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the monitor, and more than anything, favorite and share, because it always helps the channel grow. Alright guys, I've been Totally Dubbed. Take care, and bye bye.